This is The Annex, a sociology podcast. I'm Joseph Cohen from the City University of New York. Today, Neurosociology with Rengin Firat from the University of California at Riverside. Our discussion was recorded on August 12th, 2019. Okay, we're here with Rengin Firat, a sociologist from UC Riverside. Rengin has a pretty long publication, an impressive publication list, I have to say. She led a 2017 paper called Putting Race in Context, Target Social Class Modulates Processing of Race in the VMPFC and the amygdala in Social Cognitive.
Perfect.
And thank you very much, and Effective Neuroscience. And recently, she published Opening the Black Box, Functions of the Frontal Lobes and their Implications for Sociology in Frontiers in Sociology. That was this year. And Rengin is a neurosociologist, which is a crazy topic. So thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Yeah,
I'm happy to just get an explanation. It sounds like an amazing field. Your publication sounds so impressive.
Thank you.
And I'm trying to get my head around it. Tell me, what is neurosociology?
Thank you so much. So it is so exciting. It is a very new subfield of sociology. Actually, people have been writing about it for a while, like David Franks, the last decade or so. But the research, the empirical part of it is pretty new. So it is a subfield that I am trying to popularize and get people familiarized with. So neurosociology is a sociological theory and method that uses neurological methodologies and theories. My research particularly uses brain imaging, functional magnetic resonance imaging, to understand the subtle mental processes of social behavior, like racial bias, ethnic relationships, political behavior, political attitudes. So it gives us a micro lens into what is going on in human mind, human brain. Wow.
Can you explain maybe an experiment that you've conducted, like describe it, and then give us a sense of the insights that you got from your empirics?
Yeah, absolutely. So in one of the papers that you just mentioned, the title, that is a functional MRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging study, which means that I put people in this huge mesh inside a huge scanner. They lie down on a table, the table scoops in the scanner, and they are looking at pictures. So this is a very basic paradigm. This is a very standard social psychological experiment where I manipulated the pictures. So the pictures were of people from different racial and social class groups.
Okay.
So I wanted to investigate how our brains process out-group and in-group race and social class members. And one of my main findings is that, unlike where a lot of psychology research argues that like fear and aversion or anxiety might be involved, I show that it's actually also emotions like pride, sympathy, moral emotions are also important, and our brain regions that are associated with these emotions are, we can see the activation in them when people are looking at pictures of, let's say, white middle class versus black middle class people. So this is one of the revelations of one of my articles.
Can you flesh this out? So you're saying that you see, you're looking at different emotional linkages with sort of the types of things that we in sociology study, like ethnic conflict or bias or things like that. You're using brain scans to get a sense of the raw emotions that are triggered by the phenomena we study.
Exactly.
Amazing. And when you say like pride is part of bias, like what do you mean? Like what's going on there?
Pride is a very interesting emotion. It is a moral emotion, and it is a very human emotion. It builds us. It builds communities, right? We feel pride when we do our moral obligations. Interestingly, this human emotion, this moral emotion, what I found is that it is observed more for our in-groups.
Okay.
It is more, we see more pride for our in-groups, so it binds people. So it just becomes this part of this racial hierarchy in a subtle way. So a positive emotion like pride maybe is reserved for people that we admire, people like us.
So what you're saying, like, so for example, I'm a Canadian, and let's say we were studying national bias. What you're saying is I might latch on to my Canadian identity and think that national affiliation is salient and want to keep it salient because when I reflect on Canadianness, I feel the emotion of pride, and it's not something that I'd want to give up.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And that might be a motive why people have such difficulty getting rid of their attachment to identities that...
Exactly, because a lot of the social biases, what I argue, are moral biases. So it's the moral hierarchy.
What do you mean by that? Like, our biases are moral. What does that mean?
It means that they are socially constructed, as most sociologists would argue with me. What it actually also means that racial categorization is not inevitable.
Okay.
We can change that. This is relying on a moral hierarchy, our system, our discourse, our legal system, our institutions, which build not only our daily lives and the legality of things, but also a moral system, the way we think about things, the way we feel about things, which are very important. And because a lot of recent research in neurology actually shows that moral emotions are more important than moral cognition in deciding our behavior. So they are more automatic, they're fast. So they are more important than in things like racial bias.
Wow. Okay, so from what I'm gathering from you is, so for example, let's say we want to combat racism by engaging people with rational arguments. We say, well, it's not actually true that this group is more dangerous, or it's not actually true that this... What you're saying is that...
That's not going to help.
It's not going to help
it's
because it's a visceral reaction,
exactly.
These things.
It is an intuitive reaction. So people feel it in their guts. So we have to go back and change those gut feelings.
Wow.
So that is the whole argument, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Wow.
Find ways, find mechanisms that might buffer these gut reactions by looking at the brain and the body.
Wow. What other emotions did you see that attach people to, let's say, race or ethnic ideology, or their ethnic identity and racism, or, an ethnocentric view of the world?
Emotions other than pride, emotions like disgust.
Interesting.
For example. So it is not a pure hatred, but it is as if that group is not even a human category. And I even observed some regions in the human brain that are, so I also showed them pictures of objects and animals, non-human things.
Okay.
And then you find similarities in brain activation when people look at pictures of maybe like a spider, or pictures of a dirty toilet or a dirty thing.
Wow.
With stigmatized, when they were also looking at pictures of stigmatized art groups.
Wow.
Especially racial and social class art groups. So this has like big implications.
So it's like, it's almost like, I mean, if disgust is a motivator, you're like, you could see how people, if they wouldn't even want to be near the stigmatized groups.
Yeah, a lot of moral distancing, and there's a big literature also in psychology on dehumanization.
Right.
So moral emotions are very important in dehumanization.
Wow.
Yeah, but what a lot of this research doesn't look is the social structural context of these things. How does social class play into that? How does race play into that?
Now, in your research, have you looked at how these emotions get attached to identities, or are we just at the point where we're just establishing these links?
We're just establishing at this point.
Wow.
There's some recent research on how, like, the more the developmental aspects of it, but
Right.
it is still pretty recent at this point. At the time when I did this study, I actually collected my data around 2015. No, not earlier than 2010, 11. That was one of the first studies that had both social class and race. So because a lot of the psychologists were just thinking race as one uniform category, whereas as sociologists we think that race is also class-based.
Right.
So racial categories.
So like we might be attuned to the possibility that like a higher economic class person might view a co-ethnic with disgust if they're from a different economic class, for example.
Yes, but this is very subtle. That's why it is very difficult to capture with very traditional sociological methods.
Totally, I can
like
see that.
surveys or interviews. And I actually debriefed all my subjects at the end, so I had conversations with every single one of them. And all of them they're all nice people, and they're like, oh, we're so glad that you're studying racism, we want it to end.
Right.
So they're all very supportive of this type of research. But still, when we look at people's brains, we see the differences.
They have the visceral response.
Yes.
Wow. What other ones? Just give me one or two more. I hate to do this, all of it. I'm really enjoying this. Yeah, the emotions. Well, it's interesting because when you describe these phenomena in such sort of narrow emotional terms, you realize that, for example, when you think of racism, you're sort of imputing a particular type of caricature, a person with motivations or reactions or beliefs. And when the emotions that you describe are different from what, is the caricature in my head of a racist or anything, like to think of it as involving pride or involving disgust, it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It shapes the way you think about it. Like, I'm just enjoying this fleshing out. So maybe one more and then we can move on to another.
So I actually looked at 4 basic and 4 moral emotions and discussed it, sometimes basic, sometimes moral. So I also looked at fear and anger and happiness. For the moral emotions, envy. Envy is a good one.
Really?
Yes, and I found differences in envy. So I also studied patients who have damage to their certain brain regions in the same article.
Oh, wow.
And there's a part of the brain, it's called it's in the title, the VMPFC.
Ventromedial. I didn't even know what that was. I was just going to fake it.
That's ventromedial prefrontal cortices. That's the kind of in the front, but also like medially located middle part of the brain. That part is the underlying region for moral emotions.
Okay.
And especially emotions like pride and envy.
Okay.
And one of the things I found was that when in my subject group that did not have that region, either due to a tumor or a stroke, a reason or another, they showed very different responses than people who did not have any damage. So they were actually showing more biased responses. So they were reporting even more envy, even more pride for their in-group.
Oh, they couldn't. There was like no conditioning type of emotion. Why do emotions interact with each other? Do they like fight each other? Or?
They might. I think they absolutely interact with each other, and it is possible, I think, to hold all these emotions that might be conflicting with each other as well.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, for example, I can think of co-ethnics with me that I don't, on a visceral level, I don't have positive reactions to, and it might condition how totally I make, or how central my ethnicity would be to my personal identity because there's these multiple.
Exactly. So the basic idea here is that it's because humans, we have not evolved to have races. We have not evolved to have ethnicities.
Right.
But the basic idea is that when we look at human evolution, humans have evolved to have coalitions. Because in order to survive back in the time, we need to be able to establish partnerships because we are social animals to go hunting or to fight even another tribe. We need to be able to establish these coalitions.
Right.
So a lot of the neural architecture that currently defines racial bias is actually a neural architecture that has evolved to track coalitional affiliations.
Wow.
So the same thing with political alliances.
It's all tribal. Well, you hear a lot of political scientists now saying that tribal behavior sits at the root of a lot of political behavior.
Yes.
And you're saying that there's almost a program. Our emotions get mobilized to shape our behavior to be sort of pro in-group or pro tribe.
And these in-groups or the so-called tribes would depend on our quote-unquote social programming.
Right.
The groups that we are involved in,
right.
Our education system, our legal system, all these sociological factors.
Right.
So that's what neurosociology is, looking at all these sociological factors and trying to figure out how they affect the microbiological processes.
Wow. And what issues have you tackled in with this type of approach, this type of paradigm? What problems or social issues or concepts have you explored using this approach?
So far, I have looked at so other than this racial bias, in another recent study, I looked at social exclusion.
Okay.
The effects of being excluded, and so the brain. What I found, which is similar to other studies, is that the effects of when people are socially excluded, the brain regions that are activated in response to physical pain are activated.
Really?
So we feel social pain as if it is physical pain.
And that's why isolated confinement is considered such a harsh penalty.
It is a social punishment, and we feel it bodily. It's like a physical punishment.
Is it like we're pack animals and we need to, what's the evolutionary biology view on it?
We are pack animals. One of the basic arguments is that we need to be grooming each other, and we do it with language. Because our group size, like Dunbar's rule, is
what's that? I don't know Dunbar's rule. So.
I think it was so. It's the number of people. If you were at a bar, it is the number of people that you would bump into and could have a small conversation without being awkward.
Okay.
So,
so
it is Dunbar's rule is that this number is an equilibrium, and humans have evolved in this. So we could hold, I think it was around 150, if I'm not mistaken. So this is the number of people that we could sustain in our communities. If it was a small number, like 10, we did not need a lot of social rules. We would not need language, maybe.
Right.
We would not need a lot of our symbols and gestures.
Right.
But because we have evolved to be in bigger groups,
right.
but not mass, not like mass market society,
right.
but big enough that we need to be able to use the symbols and the gestures and an abstract language to be able to solve problems.
That's interesting, though. So it's like, are you saying, is the idea that there is like a natural group size?
This is what Dunbar is saying, not me.
All right.
And there is some disputes of this. This is a conversation, of course.
But it's an idea that's out there.
It is a theory, at least, that shows the socialness of humans, how we are very social animals. So I have colleagues that are primatologists that study macaque monkeys. They study chimpanzees and orangutans, and they're also social animals. And we could see the basic, even certain moral capacities like fairness.
Really?
Perceptions of fairness in other primates and monkeys.
Wait a minute. So a lot of the in-group, out-group behavior that we exhibit, is this like we're thinking of a universe of like up to 150 people who are salient to us and we mobilize like these type of schema on behalf of our group of 150? Is that it? And
that would be one theory about that, or at least because human cognition is not evolved in a mess in a modern society with millions of people living in a modern nation state. Maybe we are thinking, when we think about our nationality, when we're thinking about our political groups or racial groups, we're thinking about them as more concrete, smaller tribal groups.
Then it's like, wow, that it makes it hard to imagine a social system where there's not this animus, because there's always, if such small groups are salient, then you're always going to have like an in-group and out-group. Is that, and it's just we're programmed to be like that? Is that the idea? Or?
I think we're always going to have an in-group and out-group, but it doesn't mean that we cannot expand our in-group.
Right.
That's another thing I'm studying. So I'm very interested in studying human values as a subcomponent of human morality. And one of the values that I'm interested in is self-transcendence.
Okay.
So this is
it
is the valuing people or groups that are beyond your immediate self and immediate in-group.
Okay.
So without getting an immediate reciprocation, would you contribute money to a cause? Would you go and help a stranger on the street? Do you support equality? Do you support the welfare of other people?
So it's like you're trying to, it's like reorienting these categories that we have in our head that we react viscerally towards.
Yes.
Wow.
And one of the things I'm interested in is that does this value orientation, could it help buffer racial bias and stress that might be caused by interethnic contact? So that's one of the things I'm looking at. So that's a new project I'm launching.
Wow.
UC Riverside, to see whether or not we could look at these different values as mechanisms to buffer interethnic stress.
you said that you have some ideas of interventions that have come up over the course of your week. Can you give us sort of an overview of that?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm interested in two value prototypes. So one of them would be self-transcendence, which is established actually value domain in Schwartz values theory. I kind of turn it around a little bit, and I conceptualize it as a communal value. I say communalism. So one of the things I'm interested in is that can we increase communalism, and how can we do that? What if I put people in groups where they cooperate more? How could they cooperate more? Could we create a common symbol, common language? So that would be one way. Another value that I'm interested in, this is a concept that is also familiar to sociologists and it might be contentious, is agency, the concept of agency. So I also argue that agentic values, being able to manipulate your environment, being open to new ideas and new experiences might also help some people and protect the efforts. So in one of the manipulations that I'm trying to develop, for example, I'm asking people to recall the times that they have put in an effort to come up with creative ways to certain problems. That's one way.
Okay.
And some other way in another manipulation, I'm looking at communal values and more implicit priming, where they just read a text describing a situation. And we could just change the pronouns from I to we. So like that we-ness, like reading something with the language that says we and ours might prime people to think more communally.
Now, have you done any research along these lines, or is this a direction you're looking to go to?
Yeah, so my last brain imaging study, functional MRI study, I used these priming methods to look at how they buffer social pain in the brain. Social exclusion related pain in the brain.
Wow. And what
I find that communalism especially is helping minority groups. I had African American and Caucasian subjects. So especially African American subjects benefited from communal values. But I'm still analyzing my data. I need to do all my checks and balances, and so this is a paper in progress.
Wow. I have to say, okay, well, this has been amazing. What a line of research. That's neurosociology. First of all, if someone's, just exposed to this for the first time, might not have the biology background, like let's say an early career grad student who might not have come here from a bio background, how to get started on this, a young person who's interested?
It's a really good question. A lot of students actually ask me that question, and I don't have the best answer, of course. I just tell them what I did, and what it also depends on each person and their institutions and what are available options. So I took it was difficult. I took a lot of extra classes.
Okay.
I took neurology classes. I took medical neuroanatomy and neuropsychology courses to kind of have a background in this. So I did a lot of research in the neurology department. I attended a lot of neurology meetings. And so that I'm exposed to other people's research, and I took all this coursework, and all my dissertation work I completed in the neurology clinic.
Really? So wait, you sort of did all of this over the course of your sociology doctorate?
Yes, alongside all the sociology.
Wow. Well, see, that's what it takes. So you basically need to get two PhDs at once.
But that's what I'm trying to change in the discipline. So at UC Riverside, what I'm trying to establish with the courses I teach and the research training I offer is to introduce my students to this training without having to go to a neurology department.
Wow.
So basically they could train. Of course, they would not be a trained neurologist, but at least I could teach them the methods I know.
Be a
I could teach
neurosociologist.
Yes, exactly. They could be a neurosociologist.
Wow. What? First of all, I'm so impressed. Wow. I'm like blown away. What a line of research.
Thank you.
I'm very humbled to be hearing all of this. It sounds incredible. And I guess the answer in brief is if you want to be a neurosociologist, well, then head over to UC Riverside and look up Rengin Firat, because that's
definitely
where it's at.
Yeah, or feel free to email me with any questions. I'm very happy to answer students and other colleagues' questions.
Wow. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
this was incredible.
It. Yeah.
That's Rengin Firat from the Sociology Department at the University of California at Riverside, introducing us to the extremely exciting field of neurosociology. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to The Annex, a sociology podcast. A special thank you to Rengin Firat from the University of California at Riverside. We're on the web, sociocast.org/annex. On Facebook, The Annex Sociology Podcast, and on Twitter @Sociannex. Our producers are Laseth Moreno, Jaylene Colon, and Fazia Muhammad. I'm Joe Cohen. Thanks for listening.